Anna, Rahul, Ravi, Shantanu, and literary agent Kanishka will talk about the world and status of publishing with our very own Subodh Sankar from Ata Galata. A big round of applause as they take stage, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for them. Thank you.
Good evening. So in today's session, which is titled "Publish and Perish," we're going to be talking with some of our publisher friends from all over the world, and I'm going to be asking them some questions from the perspective of a reader and a bookstore operator. Uh, So the common adage used to be publish or perish, and today I think we are trying to explore if it's turned into publish and perish. And so in today's session, we want to talk to these folks about what are publishers doing today to kind of stay relevant and stay contemporary. And back in the days, it used to be about we had print versus digital. We do fiction, non-fiction. We do celebrity fiction, celebrity non-fiction. But what are publishers doing today? And I'd like to start by asking Shantanu to talk about it.
Thank you, Subodh, and thank you all of you for coming to this session. Very interesting title, Publish and Perish. And Subodh asked me, what are publishers doing? I think publishers are frankly scratching their heads, trying to figure out what the reading public wants. I know for a fact that in the last few months there's been a constant refrain that obituaries have been written on fiction. Now, fiction has been declared comatose, if not dead. So, and if you talk to sales teams and bookstores, the only thing that I think people are reading, according to people in sales and people in stores, the only thing people are reading are fitness books, DIYs, and self-help books, and business gyan, like trying to make sense of the modern corporate world through the Ramayana and Mahabharata and all our. So I think it's very, very difficult at home books, for example. For the longest time, they sort of had a huge impact on the market in terms of the coffee table. That's more or less gone. The cost has gone so high that unless it's a sponsored project or unless there's a commensurate buyback, coffee tables are. So one kind of publishing is gone. Fiction, absolutely, unless you can convince your CEO and the sales heads to actually, no, I've got to do this for whatever reason, mass market still has some resonance, but literary fiction, and numbers aren't flattering. So I think a lot of us are looking for a brief while after in the mid-90s, in the around 2010, I would say, it looked like celeb memoirs of the Rishi Kapoor variety was a sort of big seller. But I think that has also plateaued because most of these memoirs end up as huge PR exercises, and I've been guilty of publishing a few of those also, because you have a big name and at least you have 400 people lining up at the event and a few thousand likes on Facebook and social media, which sort of a few thousand of them do translate to a few hundred sales, which is not the case for most of them. So I think most of us are trying to figure out the market, and readers I talk to, they say there are no good books, and at the same time the publishing houses say readers don't like good books. So so I'm really I'm happy to see Rahul Soni, and he just told me that he's being allowed to do his kind of publishing, and I think that's a huge use. Like I can't tell you how much I admire his kind of publishing, and that he's still doing it speaks the world for him.
So from that, from a publisher of a major English publishing house to Ravi, the publisher of a Indian language publishing house. What is your take on what Shantanu just said? Because I think the world of Indian language publishing is going completely in different directions.
Hi. I believe the language publishing is on the rise, actually, in fact. We have many literary fiction goes into the mass market, or we call it the mass market. The best-selling books are more of the literary fiction as such, actually. We got, I'm sure K.R. Meera is somewhere here, actually. We have done a couple of lakh copies of a book, actually, Hangwoman, in Malayalam. Her latest book probably have done about 50 or 60,000 copies. So literary fiction is still on the rise, actually, in languages. And I think the next boom is going to be in the language publishing, be it Tamil or Kannada for that matter, actually. So it's quite contrary to what you have said with the languages. And fortunately, some of the Nielsen bestsellers happen to be from the second highest bestsellers in the Nielsen happens to be from the languages as well, actually, not in English.
That's true even of Bengali literature. I know for a fact that fiction is very strong in Bengali literature, in Bengali publishing.
When you look at the numbers also, it's like Malayalam is spoken by 2.5% of the population. So, but having said that, I think probably the second or third largest publishing in India, probably with Bangla and Marathi for that matter.
So, very, very interesting perspective, right? And we have with us Anna Solding from Australia. And what is your thoughts on this matter coming at it from, let's say, an external view?
Hello. First, just want to say thank you for inviting me to this wonderful festival. It's just amazing. Yeah, Australian publishing is quite different, so it's very interesting to hear about, you finding it difficult to get across, and that language publishing is going really strongly. In Australia, what has been very strong in the last few years has actually been children's publishing. So, illustrated children's books for middle grade, 8 to 12-year-olds, they've been very, very popular. You probably can get them here too, the Treehouse books, and I think I saw one the other day in a bookshop here. So that's been very, very strong in Australia. But we also, because Australia is, is obviously English is the main language, we also get all the American books that are popular. So I was recently in New York on a publishing delegation with other Australian publishers and agents, and it was very interesting to talk to the American publishers about what is coming strongly in the US, and it is reflected in the Australian market as well. And the TikTok, book talk phenomenon is very, very strong. So with Colleen Hoover leading the way, which is romance. So romance literature has kind of gone to a different level now. It is very much more accepted generally than it ever has been before, I think. The covers look like, any kind of cover. They don't have those tacky old covers they used to. And the other genre that is really strongly coming is graphic novels. So all publishers want to be in on this, and then they're growing hugely, exponentially, all the time. But of course, graphic novels take a long time to make, because they've got illustration as well as words. So, but I think that's where the big growth is coming now.
Interesting. And Rahul, of course, comes at it from a completely different perspective as somebody that works almost exclusively with literary fiction.
Yeah, that's right. I have the good fortune of being able to work with books and look at them solely as literature rather than necessarily as products or things that need to turn into the next big bestseller. And so I guess the strategy there, we were talking about what would be our strategies, I guess, to avoid perishing as an industry. And yeah, for me, I guess what I'm looking for is books that would, I think, have lasting value. And of course, it is my subjective opinion there and my subjectivity that I bring to my list. Um, but it's as simple as that. I don't think we can second guess what the readers want. Shantanu, as you were saying, right? I think we've all failed to quite figure out what it is that readers want. So yeah, I think my approach is just that very simple, basic thing. Is this a book I'd want to read more than once? Is this doing something with the form or the language? Is this a voice that is worth hearing? And the fact that that includes more and more translations from other Indian languages than English speaks, I think, to the fact that that's where the more interesting work is happening, or those are the more vital literatures right now. Uh, yeah.
And of course, Kanishka, I think as an observer, as a commentator on anything and a lot of what is going on in Indian publishing, uh, what is your take on all of this?
I'm very worried about the state of publishing, state of fiction in India. And within fiction, especially poetry and short stories, I'm all the time discouraged by editors and publishers and even sales professionals not to submit, poetry, short story collections, especially if it's a debut poetry, debut short story collection, and the author does not have an existing captive audience. In the last 10 or 12 years, I've seen that the publishing space has become very vibrant. Like 10 or 12 years ago, we did not have so many literary festivals. We did not have these workshops, events, fellowships, and some prestigious prizes, but a lot of it does not really translate into sales. And that applies to reviews also in newspapers and magazines. So how do we find influencers for fiction, influencers who will encourage book buyers to actually pick up the book?
Correct.
There's a lot of appetite for non-fiction. As an agent, I cannot dictate or curb or buck trends. So we just go by what the publisher wants. Many of the publishers are not open to genre fiction. It's not because they haven't tried their hands at like fantasy, sci-fi, horror, but these are genres where Indian writers face a lot of competition from the West. So you either have like literary fiction, fiction in translations, or you have mass market commercial fiction, which is also on the decline because the advances are very high, and because of the rising printing costs, the GST on royalties, the margins for publishers are shrinking. So I would say it's almost impossible to find new voices in the mass market commercial space, but every year you find a breakout writer of literary fiction in India and even South Asia. So, and as someone who has been representing a lot of writers from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, it's now post-COVID and after the trade halt between Pakistan and India, I cannot commission writers from Pakistan because publishers cannot supply books to
Bookstores
Pakistan.
there.
No, they cannot. They can license rights, but that's not the same thing as selling the book directly in the markets. There are payment issues, there are structural issues, books are not available on time in these countries, and so I think it's a difficult phase despite all the vibrancy and all the the buzz around books. Is it actually leading to sales? No, it's not. No, it's so.
Correct, and which is again, I mean, I want us to now, sort of talk about this. I want any of you to jump in, which is the strange thing that I see, right? When as I, in my little corner of the world, sit down in my bookstore and I interact with readers, or when I come to a literature festival and see all of these people, I mean, you can see there's a massive crowd of people inside that bookshop, literally picking up, a handful of books everywhere. And yet, when you speak to, people in the industry, whether it's publishers or salespeople, it keeps coming back to there's just not enough readership. And there's just not enough readership.
I would say the readership is stagnant because even 10 or 15 years ago, the print runs were the same 2,000, 3,000 copies. And that's the standard print run now for, debut literary
Is
fiction,
that so?
unless it's
Rahul, for even translations, is that the kind of
I would say that's more or less the range one could expect, yeah.
and
Unless
you are able to sort of sell out that first print run, or just about in a 3,000 print run, about 1,400 copies to break even is the sort of thing.
yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, that's about the math we are at.
And then the story is completely different when it comes to Indian languages. I think a print run of 2,500 in Indian language is nothing. Because here you're talking of, selling 25,000 copies and 50,000 copies and 1 lakh copies. When was the last time when anybody talked about that in the world of English publishing, right?
only for Booker winners, Booker shortlisted writers, not even Booker shortlisted writers, only winners of like the biggest prizes.
Yeah, that's when the book kind of breaks through to an audience that doesn't generally buy books or even read books, and it might just become an object in the news.
An
that
object
needs to be
art
acquired,
of
right?
sort.
Yeah, that's when we have our bestsellers in the literary space, I think.
I think in the Kannada, in the recent past, I think many books have done about 20,000 copies, 25,000
Absolutely.
copies. Actually, it's amazing. I mean, the kind of numbers which is, the kind of readers actually around the book. And Tamil also, it's the same thing. And one of the things I should say is actually the translations, where Rahul was talking about the translations, Tamil Nadu is, the government themselves are promoting the translations from Tamil actually to different languages.
In fact, we started the festival with a session on that stage about that whole process, right?
And Kerala had a similar thing about a few years back, actually. The Malayalam University had given subsidies and grants, actually, for promoting Malayalam literature into things. They don't have it now, but Tamil still continues, actually. So these are good things. Second is, actually, if you look at the JCB award as such, JCB award, as far as I know, actually, it's meant for English, books in English, and it could also be translations kind of thing. I think into English. So what I'm saying is actually the last four actually, I would say 5 JCB awards actually, 4 of them have gone to the languages, right? From the languages into translation. And 3 has been from Malayalam actually.
Sorry. I think the state of publishing is quite different in Australia. I think fiction's still very, very strong, and also cookbooks and stuff like that are going really well in Australia. And print runs are much larger than that for the bigger publishing houses. I run a small publishing house called Midnight Sun Publishing, and our print runs aren't that big, but for picture books, for example, they're often about 3,000 copies because I've already sold maybe 1,500 into schools before print. So that's a really good market for us to get our books out and to reach the readers straight where they are in schools. But I think what is really interesting now in Australia, which is related to the language publishing, is that there's a tiny publishing now with Indigenous languages in Australia, because they're not very commonly spoken, and definitely not often published, but they're trying to revive them. So that's a really, that's obviously highly subsidised as well by the government, but it's amazing. I've seen some of those books and they're beautiful. And they also take classics like The Hungry Caterpillar and translate it into, they just call it language, but they're hundreds of languages, but into language. So I think that's a really, really important thing for people who do speak their traditional languages to be able to read in those too.
It's interesting, right? So when you look at what you just talked about, and you talked about children's writing and picture books. What is Kanishka? I want to think of what's your take on that to start with. Huh?
Yeah, so we have a very vibrant independent children's publishing scene in India. They are very vibrant, they are innovative. The quality of the books, the writing, even the illustrations is top notch. For the multinationals, it's a little difficult because of the margins. but I think children's writing is evolving, it's growing. There are some independent bookstores also, which are devoted exclusively to selling like books for children, and they are also part of this movement. Um, but I mean, other than Ruskin Bond and Sudha Murthy, we don't have like big sellers in the children's writing space, and there is massive competition from children's and young adult writers in the West. I think children and teenagers in India, they primarily look to Western writers, and even the parents do the same thing for their kids and toddlers. Picture books published by bestsellers in the UK, US. So, but the space, a lot of things are happening. There are a lot of awards that have been instituted. Parag Trust is doing a lot of interesting things. They are trying to see if the government can, procure more copies, like order these books in bulk. But do we have a best-selling children's picture book writer in India? No. Do we have a best-selling children's young adult writer in India? No. But there are some writers who are writing in this educative space, basically simplifying concepts and even your ancient epics for children, who've done really well. But in the creative fiction space for children and young adults, we don't have any big seller other than Ruskin Bond and Sudha Murthy.
I think, at home, primarily they have been publishing children's books. It's only about last year or so that we have ventured more into adult trade publishing in an organized manner. And as he says, yes, Sudha Murthy and Ruskin Bond in the children's space. But then has a system of books, and they hark back to the mythologies, 365 stories, illustrated stories from the Mahabharata, or 365 Hanuman tales, that kind of 365 Christmas stories. They don't.
Those are informative books. That's not creative.
They're not like in the sense of picture books that they create. They're creating, and those kind of do well. They're not creative in that sense, but somehow they kind of resonate with the readers. And I must say this, that Om's children publishing is actually sort of subsidizing the regular trade publishing and subsidizing this on the based on these books. We don't have a Sudha Murthy yet or a Ruskin Bond, but most of these books kind of do well. 365 Good Night Boys Tales and all of that. A few concepts borrowed from the West, Indianized suitably. But they have been doing very well, and it helps that Om has its own stores where they can sort of, so
another huge trend has been the massive rise in sales of activity books, activity books, coloring books, they sell in lakhs and lakhs of copies.
But again, the margins are low in those, because the price has to be pretty competitive, because a lot of people are doing the same sort of books. So.
But I think we have industry leaders in that space, because some of them are not being so particular about the price point, so which is why they are not compromising on the the quality and the visual appeal of the book, which is very important for books for this age group.
One thing is actually, I don't know how relevant this is actually here, but European countries and North America has book policies actually. The government has a book policy when the K-12, you need to read so many books during your school days, So that also helps actually to bring in a culture, inculcate a culture of reading, So that has also contributed to the kind of reading and discussions happening across. So it's long overdue for us actually to, bring in something like that. Otherwise, it's going to be an elite crowd of 2 or 3% of the people who are going to read in India. Unlike in many countries, it's a mass actually who reads. So that's also part of it actually. That's what I believe.
True, but as we were talking, Ravi, this is a question, I was thinking, for all the vibrancy that exists, for example, in the world of fiction writing in Indian languages, we still haven't seen that happen, for example, with the young adult and children's writing there. Whereas with English, when, you're talking of publishers struggling with trade publishing, and young adult and a very, very vibrant independent network of children's writing and children's publishers are thriving. Why is it that there seems to be such a strange sort of difference between the world of Indian language publishing and Indian English publishing? And Kanishka, I know I'm going to follow that up with a question to you. So like Ravi to sort of think about that.
I think for many, English is an adopted language, actually. I mean, when it goes to other than the metros and other places, actually, So probably language publishing has more, they're deep into the system, actually, within the local and the surroundings, and actually the promotions and the way you promote is totally the whole supply chain and the marketing process itself is different, where it becomes a part of the culture rather than it's as a marketing activity. That's what I believe in.
And Kanishka, I know you would.
So I just feel, I think it's the children today, they are connected globally, and they are an aspirational readership. So they want to read books which are like, getting buzz and accolades in the UK, US. And it's not as if publishers in India, children's publishers in India haven't made attempts. I mean, look at the kind of books Duckbill is doing, the kind of fiction they are doing, edgy stuff, different genres, very representative also. The books that Pratham is doing, and young adult fantasy, children's fantasy, they've tried everything, but we don't have a breakout seller. And you were talking about how different and vibrant the children's publishing scene is in Indian languages. I have represented like close to 8 or 10 translations from an Indian language into English of very famous children's writers. They have not even sold 500 copies. So I think this space is, there's massive competition from the international authors.
Maybe the cross-cultural issues as well. The cross-cultural issues as well. I mean, it may not be translatable actually from the culture to culture. I mean, that's what I mean,
Yeah, I think so. Some of it is cross-cultural. For example, Sukumar Roy is almost impossible to translate and get the flavor of. It's only Shukanta Chaudhuri who probably gets that, but it doesn't maybe translate.
Sampurna did a...
Sampurna Chatterjee has done that. But I think, yes, a lot of it is. I was in fact, only last Children's Day, I was doing a series of 3 features on children's films and literature with Gulzar Saab and Vishal. And we were left racking our brain saying that only couple of places that there is nothing in Hindi, there's nothing in Urdu, there's nothing. Gulzar Saab saying actually that, the only languages I see some vibrant children's publishing is happening in Bengal, in Kerala, and some in Marathi. Otherwise, it's a very, very...
Not happening.
There's lots of stuff happening in Hindi. Look at what Ektara and Eklavya are doing. Vani Prakashan now has a Hindi division.
It's only recently.
Eklavya has been there for a while.
Yeah.
So one thing that is interesting is that even though we share a language in Australia with the US, so we obviously get a lot of books from the United States, that doesn't actually mean that it's very applicable, especially to a young adult audience. So in Australia, they've made a conscious effort. There's a group that is a not-for-profit group. They call themselves Love Aus YA. So it's Love Australia Aus YA. And that just means that they promote each other. So all the people in that group and surround, and they have newsletters and just make sure that people know which books are written by Australian authors about an Australian setting, because it is different. And I mean, I think it's the same as with a different language, that actually Australia, it is that different from the US. And I think it's very important that Australia has its own publishing culture for young adults.
So all of this is kind of now, we've talked about the structural, the other fundamental things that publishers and publishing editors and everyone in the publishing industry is thinking of. Would it be nice to, hear from the publishers here and from Rahul and Anna about what are publishers thinking of? Are publishers even thinking of in terms of still publish or perish? Or publishers thinking, is there a publish and perish likely to happen somewhere in the near future?
I think there's a huge scope actually. I mean, like, one thing is actually we have to constantly evolve actually. There's a new formations actually really helps in Malayalam actually. I mean, the kind of autobiographies you have done actually. I mean, I would say one book we have done is Autobiography of a Thief, which has uh, done brilliant numbers actually. Autobiography of a sex worker. These are some areas actually. I mean, I'm saying this is just an example. If you look at the self-help also, I mean, some of the self-help books we have created are very specific to the locale actually. I mean, we have done 100,000 copies of book in 3 years actually, which is purely maybe may not be translate. You cannot translate to another language probably, but it sells well in the language actually. So you need to sort of find your niche and where you can probably experiment and grow actually. I mean, I would say one thing actually. I mean, 3 years back when we were in a similar literature festival, Kerala Literature Festival, so we asked Benjamin to do a book actually, whether he could work together with us to do a shuffled fiction. So we did a shuffled fiction. I mean, like, it's a 120 chapter book actually. You can start from any page and you can, that's where the start is. Wherever you read, whatever you read, the last is going to be the last page. So we came out with a shuffle book actually, shuffle fiction, that has so far in the last 4 or 5 months that done about 20,000 copies actually. So that experiment took 3 years actually. It went back and forth at least 2 or 3 times with the editors. So a lot of experiments had to happen within the content creation as well, I think. And that's what's happening in many of the languages. I mean, I'm not talking about Malayalam alone, I think.
Right.
Many of the languages actually, there's more experimentation with the writing style to the kind of writing happening than probably in English.
I think it's a chicken and egg situation. Like
It is, truly is.
yeah, because editors will do a good book, thinking this will do good numbers. It's it's a book that reads well, and then you put it out to the market. It doesn't do that well. Sales comes back saying this kind of books don't work. Editors start to second guess. Let's do something else. I think it's. I am looking at publishing at least a few books in the year that I'm passionate about, I believe in, even if they sort of don't do the numbers. I'm helped by the fact that the authors I've worked with so far have been understanding in, I don't know how royalties work out in local languages. I know for a fact that Bengal doesn't pay at all. The advances are absolutely abysmal, and the authors are good to publish even without big advances, and the numbers that those books do are pretty big. We are actually asking our authors to go for a higher royalties and lower advances, which kind of help us price the book well.
There's no guarantee if the author will get the royalty on time.
Yeah, so that's
a
also
problem
there.
across the
Yeah, that's there, but I don't know about
industry.
how royalties are a pressure on the system.
Malayalam has many writers, more than 100 writers who can just survive with their royalties actually. I mean, that's what I mean.
Wow, that's
I mean,
amazing.
sort of.
That's amazing. And from Anna's perspective and Rahul's perspective, what is this thing that you worry about, and in terms of to stay relevant, and what is that strategy? I know it's very difficult when you're working within this field where it is literary, and therefore you probably think of it very differently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, yeah, like I was saying earlier, you can't second guess these things, right? So there's no point. I don't even try. My remit is very simple. I handle the literary list, and so I publish literature, or what I think is literature. And I think to an extent, all of us are in this because we think language matters and we think stories matter, and we will, I think, keep finding a way to keep getting these out there. There might be slightly difficult times. There might be great times as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I do think, I don't accept that fiction is dead. the obituaries are premature in English also. I can't imagine a world that does not have imagination, that does not have fiction. I can't imagine a world which is only about self-help and fitness and all of that, the fitness of the mind, fitness of the imagination. So I believe in that. I believe in good fiction, and hopefully.
Likewise, because I think most of us start by reading stories, and therefore you're reading fiction to start with, right? How can that be just dead?
I wouldn't say fiction is dead. I would just say that being an Indian agent who's working on commission on, advances and royalties adding up to like 2 or 3 lakhs in the best of cases, is just getting very difficult for me to take on debut fiction all the time, work with the author to hone and develop the book, and then like not get responses for 4 months. I end up placing most of the books I take on, but it's just getting very difficult. And as an agent, I will continue to be genre agnostic. I will be open to all genres, diverse writing. I will also continue to do mass market fiction and non-fiction so long as the writing is good, so long as the author has credibility and has done good research. But I think it's just getting difficult to sustain this model of agenting. And I'm just talking from an agent's perspective. Unless you keep finding Tomb of Sands every year, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Australia, fiction's not dead at all. Like, fiction's thriving for sure. And in terms of my own publishing as well, I'm in the fortunate position that I run and own the publishing company. So I only publish what I love, and I love fiction. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. And I think, I mean, there is a lot of it. We get huge amounts of submissions. And one thing that I do as well that has become stronger in the last few years is I publish short stories. Because for quite a few years, people were scared that short story collections weren't selling. But they're really coming back now. All the bigger publishers are also publishing them. And when I wear my other hat, when I'm not a publisher, I also run the Australian Short Story Festival. And I know from that short stories are very strong, and amazing writers coming to the festival, and lots of people coming to listen. So short stories, I suppose, are the epitome of that story. They're short and people can take them in quickly, but they're not necessarily easy to write because they're short. But I definitely think fiction is very strong, and I think we should all keep reading it because it's amazing.
So we have, if there are any questions from the audience, because I think we've had a very interesting set of opinions. We've had a very, very differing set of opinions. And if there are questions, we have about 6 minutes left. I think we could take a few.
And then you were talking about the child literature and the scene of publishing there. How has that not changed at all? Because the reading ground, the children, the catering, the quality, and the publishing of it has remained. And is it because of the highly digitalization of the world that we're entering to, that people are no more preferring paperbacks, and that's why publishers and paper-bound books are becoming less? So what is that a factor? Is digitalization a factor?
I don't know of any children's books in the e-book or audiovisual format. So I mean, definitely digitalization is not a factor in the dismal or the stagnant sales of children's books. I think, I mean, we are primarily talking about mainstream publishers and their children's list and young adult list. And I was saying how there is just extreme competition from the West, and which is why we don't have any bona fide bestsellers in this space. But there is no competition, there is no lack of interest because of digitization, because this genre doesn't lend itself well to...
No, I meant digitalization for the general, in fiction, non-fiction, that form of writing. But then this...
No, I don't think audiobooks and ebooks have taken off in India. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because during COVID, there was a time when readers did not have access to books in any form. They could not buy books from Amazon because Amazon did not consider books to be essential items. All the bookstores were shut down. Publishers were experimenting with ebook first, publications and audiobooks. I don't think the sales picked up, spiked. People were just going back to the books they had bought many years ago and had not, had a chance to read them. So I think but it's good for the industry in general because it's a new avenue of income for writers and publishers also. If publishers hold the rights and the agents, so you have many ebook platforms and audiobook platforms who are actively buying rights, and they are paying good monies, and they are also translating those books into different languages in the audio form. But I don't think ebooks, audiobooks, or this digital format has really impacted the print book. There is a lot of competition from like platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime. Yeah, that's a problem. And
They said when they connected the railroad from east to west in the U.S., they said if you build it, then people will come. So publishers doing anything, we have very short attention spans today. Everyone's like looking at 40 characters, 120 characters, and things like that. And I know there's one poet, Rupi Kaur, who wrote Milk and Honey, and she kind of made this, fit it within that parameter of the short attention span. But that's not all writing is all about, right? People still love books. What are the publishers doing? I know you mentioned that you wanted you took the leap of faith to believe in what you believed was good. How many publishers really do that? They just want to see, what sells, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and say, hey, I'm going to do this because I think it'll work.
I think publishers across publishing houses, big, small, MNCs, indies, they are very, very passionate about, discovering and publishing good literary writers. It's just that they have to publish, mass market books because they have to keep the companies running. Most of the times, these big authors, these evergreen sellers, they are subsidizing, literary publishing. So I think publishers are very focused on publishing literary books. So what I'm trying to get at is that despite all the vibrancy around, like books, publishing, literary fiction, these new very prestigious awards, book sales are not going, they are not very high. I mean,
Yeah, and a short attention span you mentioned, that's true. Like I write for a number of columns these days, and everybody tells me, this is the screen attention span you have. They'll watch this, whatever comes in the first swipe is what you're going to get. So if that is the case, books stand little chance. But I think we need to publish what sells. The mass market, the fitness books and everything, we need to publish so that we don't perish, so.
Very true.
And let's give Anna a chance to.
I just want to address the fact that, I'm lucky I can publish whatever I love, but I know a lot of publishers in Australia, and most of them do that. Even if they work for a bigger publisher, they actually do have the freedom to choose which books to publish. And so if you enjoy working with coffee table books, that's where you position yourself within that publishing company. If you enjoy kids' books, then you go to a kids' book company. But I think that is part of what makes publishing so interesting, is that it does have many different aspects to it, and you can go into a niche that you actually do love, so that you can love basically everything that you publish. And of course, there are big bestsellers, but some people do actually love them. So, and I think it's really, really important that we have publishers that love different kinds of books, because, how boring would it be if we only had one kind of book?
Amazing. I think on that note,
just one small thing.
We have 16 seconds left, so if it can be a really, really short question.
Yeah, in Bengal, they have the library movement. Every district has a library and they buy books. They have Boi Mela and the Literary Fest are good. I think this is area where all publishers and distributors should also work at.
I think we will take that as a great suggestion to end this session with. So I thank you all. Thank you all for coming to the Bangalore Literature Festival. It was wonderful chatting with you, and thank you all for being here to listen to us.